It's pretty clear that the world is moving quickly, technologically, and a big part of that is how we communicate. We're probably all familiar with a newer form of communication, the text message. We have an example of it here. And on the left you can see an iPhone engaging in text messaging, and on the right the typical slang used in those text messages. But if you look carefully, you can see where we're going to be going with this, with things you should do on the left, proper spelling, proper grammar, proper punctuation, and things on the right that you typically shouldn't do in electronic communication, even though it might save the space. There are a few forms of electronic communication that we're going to look at today. I divided them into formal, informal, and social media. The formal is the one that we're probably all the most familiar with, and that's email. Email is used to, largely in place of letters. It typically forms some kind of electronic record and is pretty permanent. Transient messaging would include things like instant messaging and text messaging, and today we're going to look at text messaging and the ways to go about doing that. And lastly, we're going to talk about a couple forms of social media. And while there are a number, we're going to look at two in particular, Facebook and Twitter, and how we should communicate using those as we adjust to the electronic communication age. So email. First off, we're probably, like I said, the most familiar with email, so some of this might be review, but these are important considerations for etiquette and efficiency when using email for a communication medium. First of all, do use brief subjects. This is more important for people who go through more email, that they be able to look at the subject line of email and know exactly what that email is about. There's a certain level of promptness expected with an email. It should be responded to within about 24 hours, and if that can't be achieved, then you should set up some kind of auto reply to let the sender know that they won't be receiving a response from you that quickly, because in this day and age, even something as formal and relatively slow-paced as email requires a response time within a day. Use proper capitalization and punctuation. This is important and the most natural in email. And also stay away from long paragraphs. They're intimidating to read, and if you just have big chunks of paragraph, people are going to be less likely to read those seriously. So it's good to break it up into smaller pieces, smaller chunks. And lastly, be careful with the reply to all feature. It's a good feature, a good way to have a conversation thread of emails between groups of people, but you can also get into trouble by hitting reply all when you didn't mean to and sending email to more recipients than you intended. There's 4 things not to do. Try not to use many abbreviations. This is going to be an ongoing theme. Just because it's electronic and quicker doesn't mean that you should take shortcuts in the way that you write. You should try not to use attachments if at all possible. A lot of security issues that arise from email arise through the attachments, and to the extent that some email systems reject attachments outright. And while those are few and far between, it highlights the importance of avoiding attachments whenever possible. Of course, you can't always avoid that, but you should when you can. You shouldn't abuse forwarding. Email forwarding, in a way, if it happens too much, it feels like spam. So if your ratio of forwarded emails to self-written emails is 5 to 1, people are going to be very unlikely to read any of your emails, even the ones that you wrote yourself. And lastly, you shouldn't, while you can expect a certain level of privacy through email, you shouldn't expect that the things you write will remain private. And this is going to be another ongoing theme, that just because you wrote something and sent it to one person doesn't mean that you're the only 2 people who are ever going to see about it. Email is fairly permanent, and easily spreadable, so keep that in mind whenever you use email. And here we have the next thing we're going to talk about, text messaging. And the biggest don't of text messaging is don't text message while you drive. And because this is the kind of thing that can happen to you. So yes, text messaging is done with cell phones. And a text message consists of 140 characters that's sent from cell phone to cell phone typically, although more and more devices are taking on this capability as it increases in popularity. So what are some good things to do when you're text messaging? Well, first of all, it's more of a high priority item, and typically people will expect a response within an hour. And so if you need a response right away, a good idea is to text someone rather than email them. Keeping in mind that it needs to be done in between tasks. It's very poor etiquette and rude to take out a cell phone while you're having face-to-face conversation with someone and begin text messaging someone else. You should learn the predictive abilities of your phone. Almost all phones now have built-in predictive texting capabilities, and they differ from model to model, but they're very powerful and help you write faster, even to make up for the small form factor of the keyboard. When at all possible, try not to use more than 140 characters. If you do, your text message gets split up, and that's annoying to people receiving text messages, especially if one of them gets lost, or if you send more than 2, 3, 4, 5 text messages and they arrive out of order. It gets really confusing really fast. If you need to say that much, you should probably send an email. Again, don't use abbreviations, and also don't use all caps. Just because you're writing a little bit doesn't change the fact that all caps, when it is typed, feels like you're yelling, and that's not what you're going for, unless, of course, you are trying to yell. And again, don't text message while conversing with others.